Why do we need to be bothered about global crises?
So, I think can all recognise that we've had some pretty big global events happening over the last couple of years, and I think particularly with COVID, the world has turned. So we were already in a place of what was called VUCA at the time, volatile, uncertain. I can't remember all the acronym if I'm honest, but complex. And um, we were already in this world of kind of really challenging environment. There was polarization across countries. We had Brexit vote, we had Trump, we had and then climate change increasingly making itself very obvious. And then we had this global crisis, which both unified us as a globe and divided us. It really gave us all a massive shock on an individual basis and made us really focus on what was important to us. So actually, like even smaller issues, things that wouldn't have come up as much before, far more contentious now, and actually they impact on a much greater scale. So for me, global crisis is so crucial, particularly because actually an experience of your brand in one part of the world is going to be very different in another part of the world. And actually, unless we're paying attention to those issues, that's where we get into trouble. So it's interesting. If you ask my husband, I know nothing about the World Cup. I know absolutely nothing about football, and I'm very uninterested in it, to be honest. However, I have been fascinated by this one because the fact that it's in Qatar, the fact that the lead up to it was so very kind of contentious in the first place. So already you've got this big football body, global football body and brand, FIFA, with deep questions around how that decision was made, who was involved in that decision, accusations of bribery, right, left, and centre. Then the fact that actually it was necessary to run the Football World Cup in a very different time of year, which upset the traditional footballing powers a lot. And then, really vitally, a lot of deaths a bit involved in the kind of building of the stadiums. So it was already going to be very controversial, but actually, is it really encapsulated those global issues that I was talking about? It encapsulates the fact that actually we are as a globe, we've all been through a collective trauma. We all are very aware of actually what's important to us, what bothers us so much more. And it's brought up values as such a core thing. And the World Cup really deals with those. So we've got things like human rights, we've got things like equality, the right to protest, and then finally, really crucially, it brings in the question of power. And the power in this dynamic, in this conversation, who had the power, like FIFA had the power to give the World Cup to Qatar. But actually, even bigger than that, who has the power in the world right now? This has really raised that question. We are used to a very Western dominated world that had extended power across the globe. That is no longer the case. We're in a place where the energy crisis means that the Middle East have significantly more power. And actually, within that power dynamic, who has credibility? Who has a voice to be able to speak in this conversation? And actually, do we have any kind of foundation on which to base those arguments on? There have been loads of debates we've all seen, and kind of brands getting into trouble. There's been the big discussion around LGBTQ plus rights in Qatar, a really important discussion, but ended up by being reduced to kind of a rainbow, just the kind of whether players were going to wear the rainbow flag. It's much more fundamental than that. And then I think legitimately, but quite in a quite tricky way, accusations being thrown back the other way to the West. How do you get to tell us how to exist? How do you get to tell us what laws we should have? Like, we were subject to the Crusades. You have done unmitigated wrongs throughout history. And what now we're in the wrong and we don't get a voice, we don't get to develop, we don't get to exist and do well. So it's really bringing up those discussions. And I think what's tricky at the moment is that most governments and most brands are not in a place where they're listening enough and demonstrating enough humility in order to be able to navigate through this kind of issues well enough, to be honest.
So, I mean, that's a really complex situation. What are the top tips that you would have for brands in relation to working in this kind of global way, particularly when crisis is happening?
So I've worked previously for an education publisher, and we published all over the globe. So I dealt with a lot of these issues on a regular basis. And one of the biggest mistakes you can make is to have a simplistic response to what is a very complex issue. In the end, it takes a lot of energy and time to work out, first of all, what you're doing in the first place, but second of all, how you're going to defend it. You've got companies like Brewdog going, yeah, great, we fixed this, we're going to protest. And yet it's perfectly obvious that actually they're going to benefit significantly from that protest, not to mention selling the beer in Qatar. So actually a lot of brands are leaping to, oh, this will work. Actually, that doesn't really deal with the broader issue. We can't really sit there any longer and go, oh, that's terrible over there, isn't it? Okay. It's not comprehensive enough. So actually, what brands really need to think about, and I think a lot of the sports brands have done this more in recent years. So you had the example of Nike and Colin Kaepernick during, or I think even like 2018, they came up with that when he took the knee in America, and actually they hesitated for a moment, thought about dropping him as as one of their kind of big ambassadors, then actually made a massive campaign on the back of him. If you're sensible as an organization, and this isn't an easy thing to do, you are doing a lot of work right now on what your values are as a brand. And I'm not just talking about like the internal values exercise where you're all sitting around and thinking about, well, how do we feel about each other? Actually, these are values that are very visible to the world and that you are willing to stand for publicly. You are willing to lose customers for, because again, we're not in a world where actually it's easy to just go, we're on the side of fairness. And everyone's like, yeah, great. Yeah. Actually, people are very much more likely to question every single thing. Even that Colin Kaepernick example, for example, Nike got found out about the fact that they had a fully white board. They had very few people who were from ethnic minorities or black backgrounds anywhere near the top of their leadership. So we're not in a simple world anymore. We're very much in a complex world. But actually, if you've done the values work and you've, as an organization, worked out how courageous are we willing to be, you're going to be in a better place. And then on the crisis side, just be ready because it will be coming. I think both of us would agree on that. Like most organizations, they're coming for you no matter what happens. So actually, be ready to listen, and be ready to be humble and authentic, because the issues will come. Actually, it's your response and your willingness to learn as a result of them, even if you believe you're right. If you learn from them, actually, you can survive them a lot better.